Parking Garage Rally Circuit is a random arcadey game that heavily influences the Sega Saturn itself, as it's pretty much been described by the people who made this game. It uses the game engine Godot along with the assets of Blender. I pretty much know Blender as I pretty much used it myself back in the day when I first started YouTube itself. So what is this game all about? It's an arcadey racing game, of course. Now, in terms of the game itself, you can play the game up to 4 players locally and 8 players online. I wanted to test out the online portion of the game, and unfortunately I couldn't find any lobbies that were open. But in a recent patch, they added in Steam Workshop, and the game received overwhelmingly positive reviews, and with the workshop itself, you can create your own game tracks in terms of the race tracks itself. There really isn't much tracks in terms of like single player. There's, again, like I said, local multiplayer or online. But there is a couple of ways to play around with the visual settings. You could play it in a Sega Saturn hardware type stuff, a modern handheld, a full set of PC, or maybe old PC, or you can mix and match whatever it is that you want in terms of the visual aesthetics. But the game itself will still look like a Sega Saturn type game, which is something you've never really seen. You've only really seen games that are heavily influenced by PS1 or Nintendo 64, but Sega Saturn is a welcome to a whole addition of inspirations. You're racing a track in single player where it's more like you going against ghosts for some reason being, which I guess it's fine, but it would have been better if they actually had race cars for you to race against, instead of having ghosts. But there's 2 little modes in single player. There's racing, and there's endurance. Endurance is more like trying to top your score in terms of like scoring each checkpoint. And racing, well, it's racing of course. There's 3 ways to win: bronze, silver, and gold, all in first, second, and third. But if you manage to score second or higher, then you'll be able to play these tracks in endurance. There's like a couple of tracks in each lane, but then the more you complete each lane, the more vehicle classes that you unlock, and then you replay them in terms of those different vehicles, which can be proven to be quite challenging. I recommend take the tutorial lessons of this game, so that way you'll be able to have no problem defeating other opponents. Will this game come out on modern systems? I have no idea, but it's quite possible that it could, since the support of the game's been pretty well. For anyone that plans on playing this on Steam, it's verified in the Steam Deck, and I pretty much tested it myself, and it plays pretty well. The battery life isn't that much affected either, so that's a pretty good sign for such things to come. I say it's because the Steam Deck has a habit of having poor battery life, so it's just something to be aware of if you're going to play this on a handheld, which is the only handheld experience that you'll be able to play on. But for the game itself, it's recommended for, well, everyone, including myself at least, to play the game using full-blown controller, as I feel like it's the best way to experience the whole game itself instead of playing a mouse and keyboard, or just maybe a keyboard entirely. Seriously, just play the game on a controller. You'll have a much better experience and have a much better time playing this game. The game usually has like a 2 or 3 laps in each different tracks in the game itself. And you really want to try to grab some gold trophies as you possibly can. But the game doesn't have much achievements to offer, but it's still something that you can try to get. Not to say the frame rate isn't even that bad either for a Sega Saturn type game, and it's pretty fluent. I haven't had any frame rate problems in terms of playing on PC or the Steam Deck itself, so hopefully one day, like I said, we should get a modern console release, like maybe on Switch or PlayStation or maybe Xbox. Some tracks are fine, and some tracks are just questionable, because when you're driving so fast, you have no idea where you're going, and part of the reason is that even though there might be signs, it might be way too late for you to even see where you have to go, because there's sometimes confusion across some of the tracks that I pretty much played. Like, especially when it comes to mostly just turning around or trying to drift. Speaking of drifting, you're gonna need to drift a lot. That way you can build up your speed, and then that way you can take up first place. And that's a key feature for this game. There's also a special startup boost. At a certain time, you'll be able to boost up a lot better than anyone else in the game. But despite the game being quite fun for what it is, I think the only problem is that every time you beat the game in terms of laying a track, you're replaying the same track over and over again. Which you would have thought they would have added in some new tracks, but unfortunately this wasn't even the case. I also hope that at some point in the patch or a future patch they add in some sort of like bot mode so you can race against bots instead of ghosts. I just wish they would do that, since there are some games that I've played in terms of racing or maybe some sort of other games I've played in the past that has a bot mode where you can go against, well, it makes it look like you're going against people, but you're really not. I just wish that it had that feature in terms of single player content. But regardless of that, you can still play the game up to like 4 players local and 8 players online. Well, like I said, I couldn't even really find anybody for some weird reason, so if you have friends, then hey, be my guest. But again, I think it's just best the way they play on the controller because it was just made for it. But I still think the game looks great and it plays fun pretty well, but I think once after you complete these tracks over and over with different types of cars, then you pretty much have nothing else to do. Well, if you guys want more ways to play this, then there are custom tracks that just came out, so hopefully the mod support will still keep going with the whole tracks, and maybe there'll be more stuff to play in terms of like custom made tracks and whatnot. So that's basically all I'll say. And the music, a part of it too, pretty much does sound something like you play Crazy Taxi. That's where kind of the vibe I get when it comes to hearing the music. I think once you play Crazy Taxi, you'll probably know what I'm talking about. But regardless of that, I say when it gets a sale on Steam, then definitely get this.